You're listening to Wild Things and Wild Places, a Muley Fanatic Foundation podcast that aims to discuss issues and efforts related to the Muley Fanatic Foundation mission, the conservation of mule deer, furthering the sport of hunting, and sound wildlife management.
Everybody knows I'm a Muley fanatic.
It's time for Wild Things and Wild Places. And here's your guide, Joshua Coursey.
Welcome to another episode of Wild Things and Wild Places. Joining me today, not a guest unfamiliar with this effort, the good doctor, Dr. Kevin Monteith. Welcome, my friend.
Hey, thank you. How are we doing?
Doing well. Hey, thanks for your time. This is a very busy time for you and your calendar of events. Let's talk about what that looks like before we get to some meat and potatoes of what I really want to visit with you about. Obviously, leading the Monteith Shop comes with some great responsibilities, but then also as part of the University of Wyoming and the Excellence Chair. Is that the right title?
Yeah, I guess that's an additional title that I have.
Yeah, but the nuts and bolts of that is you're a professor at the University of Wyoming. What are you teaching this semester?
Spring semester is where I go through some of the primary load associated with my teaching. So spring semesters, I teach what is basically, it's a sophomore level, but essentially the first wildlife and fisheries management focused course that students that are in wildlife or associated natural resource majors go through. And so it's a 4-credit course that's associated with, introductory to what is wildlife and fisheries management, concepts associated with the North American model, links to human dimensions, human users, and have over the years have worked pretty hard to revise the course in a way to emphasize some of the, maybe what seems like the less important skills in the realm of wildlife management, where we think about the technical aspects of it, but herein we're working on learning, growing, developing those less technical aspects that are things like writing, written and oral communication, critical thinking, how to think through and process information and draw inferences from that. Because at the end of the day, as we've talked about on here as well, we can have all the technical skills, but it's a matter of then what we do with that information and how we bring that to the fold in thinking about wildlife management and everything from just public communication to the associated policies that emanate from what we learn. And so that's the course that I teach this spring semester, and then also interfacing with the Wyoming Wildlife Fellowship program and the fellows that we have as a part of that program as well. Yeah, the ebb and flow from one semester to the next. Of course, I have the privilege of working with an absolutely incredible team of people that I like to say pretty well drive themselves. I just have to do my best to get out of the way and make sure hopefully everybody has what they need to carry on and do great things. And then things just cycle from one semester, one season to the next, from various field work through the year to teaching demands in various semesters to any of the other outreach related endeavors that we engage in. Part of our team is currently at the sheep show in Reno through this weekend. Yeah, it's constantly changing.
It's a full plate, isn't it?
A little bit, yeah, maybe overflowing at times, but that's all right. It's a blessing to be able to have the privilege to do what we do.
Perfect segue for what I wanted to visit with you about. I had told you before we had this recording that we're just going to have a raw and unfiltered conversation. I just wanted to be able to visit with you specifically, and the episode that will follow this, we'll get into the meat and potatoes associated with what her specific work is. But I wanted to talk to you about the announcement that was made last month with the second MFF Fellow, and that being Rebecca Rafferty. And I really wanted to do a deep dive into what a fellow is and what the history of that is, how this came to be, how important this is. And there's no better person to be able to speak on this than you specific, because this was an idea that you and I had a conversation about a number of years ago to establish the MFF Fellow. Dr. Taylor Lashar, the first MFF Fellow. But for those that aren't familiar with a fellow and what that means in the world of academia, let's talk about that.
Yeah, sure. And you'll have to help steer and direct me to what things seem most valuable relative to the aspects that we wish to convey in association with this. But I think when we consider some of these aspects within academia in particular, and I think that's where maybe folks may be most familiar with that process and in situations where donors or other programs put together resources to invest in a specific position. And so it's not uncommon for people to hear about professors that are in association with some form of endowment and are in named positions. It's a great way for various individuals or organizations to leave a legacy, to continue to support a program indefinitely over some certain period of time. And that carries some prestige with it, some additional benefits in supporting the program and that sort of thing. And that is not an uncommon process in academia, specifically when it ties to the naming of professorships or faculty members in those specific lines. And so that system has been in place for a long time. And in just reflecting about some of those underlying principles associated with the benefits that come from it in a situation like that for faculty members, I began reflecting on what that looks like, and then even just in thinking about our team here. Of course, as we work and conduct research across the West, with the focal point of our research being in Wyoming, we've often operated in a way where I don't treat my students as if they're students, and we certainly don't operate as if they're students. The truth is, we're all at various different stages of our career, are growing in different ways, but we all have the opportunity to contribute in meaningful ways. And certainly our team here, both through the type of science we engage in, the various outreach, communication, and other products that we develop through the course of that, while our team, our scientists are coming here and are gaining degrees, they're plugged in so many different ways that we function as a team, as a group of employees. And I think that in one way, I hope helps the growth and development in the direction that we want to go. But just in thinking about our team in that way, gave me pause in thinking about the various name positions, for example, that exist on campus that come into the fold. And I thought, why couldn't we have a process wherein we would functionally create a named position that could be a student or any sort of other position here that would carry with it the associated prestige, the additional support, the recognition of the contributions of that person, and then simultaneously provide, and I think reaffirm, we already have this great partnership that exists, but it just reaffirms that segue and that direct connection to, for example, the Muley Fanatic Foundation, and seeing the directed support and the development of a scientist, the contributions associated with that scientist and what they're bringing to the fold to advance science and wildlife management, and then just helps formalize that relationship in that way. So I see it as a process that only yields substantial benefits as a whole for everybody. I would hope it's mutually beneficial, and then simultaneously to elevate these exceptional people that are here and doing truly amazing things. And I think that has played out in amazing ways with both the inaugural fellow, which was Dr. Taylor, and then with now the incoming Rebecca Rafferty.
Yeah, Kevin, were these opportunities available when you were in the midst of your climb of this ladder in your pursuit of higher education and your doctorate degree? And were these type of opportunities, did they exist for you? Or give me a little history on that and what was available and what you've learned from your own experience in pursuing your doctorate degree and the research that was done to get you to where you are today. I'm assuming that there were some opportunities that were developed because there was nothing like this that you were able to seize, or it would have assisted in being able to provide you more than anything, probably a little bit of confidence and stability, and just being able to know that this type of work takes time at a time in your life when you're also trying to juggle the ability to be able to meet your own personal finances and existence. But what did that look like for you, and how did that help develop you being able to seek out what these type of things could be and benefit for someone else?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. When I came through the ranks, I truly didn't have a clue. It's unclear how much of a clue I have now, as you could attest to.
I'm
But
biting
at the
my
same time
tongue.
back then, but at that point in time, I really didn't know how to navigate the academic system or even exactly where I was going in the end. I ended up in a place that, I didn't even know exists, nor would I have ever fathomed to end up here today. And coming from poor family without the added monetary support and trying to work through my ranks in college, basically what that looked like for me is some of the things that are not unlike some of the systems that are in place right now is like our program here. We are essentially exclusively funded off of soft money. And so outside of 9 months of my salary, my entire team and all the work that we're fortunate to be able to do is all funded through granting process, fundraising, support from nonprofits, agencies, our collaborative endeavors, those sorts of things. So we're blessed to be able to have the support and the partnerships that we have. Much thanks to all those that contribute to the work that we do. But in the absence of that, we don't exist. And so when I came through the ranks, I participated to a great degree, in particular, my late master's degree, to help fundraise, writing proposals, competing for grants, raising money to be able to keep the projects going that we were working on at that point in time. It was difficult, and I didn't always have the monetary support to make that possible in instances, and it's not uncommon for many students, grad students, to have the teaching assistantship wherein they are functioning to basically co-teach or support a faculty member who is teaching a course, and that's how they gain their stipend through the course of the semester. And admittedly, these people are pursuing degrees, so they're here to obtain a degree, but there's not a lot of monetary support that comes with their living in poverty, essentially, much like I did when I came through the ranks, is barely working to make ends meet. With what we've been able to do through the Muley Fanatic Foundation Fellow is unlike anything that I was even aware of or even heard of as I came through the ranks as a grad student. There, in some instances, students are able to garner funding through National Science Foundation and their associated program that provides a bit of a fatter stipend for the students that compete for and gain recognition through that program. And then they get a better stipend that compensates them a bit better so just to help them in pursuit of their grad degree and their program. So there's that. And then the only other thing that I'm familiar with, and there may well be other programs out there, but the Boone and Crockett Club has a somewhat similar program where they support students at various institutions across the country. The Boone and Crockett Club is also named, much like the naming of the Muley Fanatic Foundation Fellow that we've talked about. They have named a number of faculty positions placed in particular campuses across the U.S. And within those campuses where they have named professors and they're Boone and Crockett chairs, in those instances, there's some additional funding that comes with that to support graduate fellows in pursuit of their graduate program. But beyond that, it's a fairly rare thing. And I think in the realm of a lot of fundraising in pursuit of either endowments or various named positions, they're generally focused on faculty. And I think not that's a disservice to our students, but for as hard as our grad students work, for all the other things that they engage in, especially amidst our team, where they're plugged in, how they're contributing. To me, it was just another way to provide that recognition and provide the associated support for somebody in pursuit of their advanced degrees. I think it's a very phenomenal way to be able to give back and support the next generation of scientists, as they're not only pursuing their advanced degrees, they're contributing as they do it, but it's establishing a relationship, a pathway, and is going to yield to that much that much greater contribution over the long term as they engage downstream from their career beyond when they leave here, just like Taylor is as she's advanced into her current position now.
Yeah, and that position of professorship with Utah State University, I assume there was an elated sense of joy for you and for her, obviously, but I'm sure that was equally held by you in just seeing that advancement for such a wonderful scientist, but to see that career move forward, that had to be pretty special for you, I would think.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine, and it's truly incredible. And I think that there's a bit of uniqueness there to some degree. Taylor, it's not too common for a person to obtain both of their advanced degrees at a single institution, which Taylor did. She came here as a master's student, advanced her master's degree.
Question, I'm curious, you indicated that's not that common. Why is that?
It's not common because it's discouraged. And even when I came through the ranks, there's various advice that's given from your professors and stuff like that. Do this, don't do this. And it's often frowned upon to obtain degrees from the same institution, because part of gaining the subsequent degrees is to broaden your experience, diversify the folks that you work with, and gain those next levels of experience that you may not get by staying at the same institution. And so basically, if you just take that surface level advice, and Taylor, for example, had to go through and make this decision, and her and I talked about it at length, after she came here, obtained her master's degree, and then she had already been working supporting some aspects of the Wyoming Range Mule Deer Project. In fact, the way in which we ended up recruiting her for a master's is she came up here to work as a technician on that project. And then we recruited her for her master's degree. And then there was the notion of her picking up and taking over the Wyoming Range Project. And even at that point in time, she had been told by many, don't do that, because you should not obtain your next degree from the same institution. And what that meant for her at that point in time is she was, if you want to call it a sacrifice, or there was basically a mark against her in her staying here. But as her and I talked, it was the right project to be able to do that with, and if we pursued it in the right way, and I knew the potential that existed in Taylor and still does, and I'm like, no, if we dig in and we do this right, it won't hold you back at all, and we will make sure of it. And I think the fact advanced through all those stages, I had the opportunity to work with Taylor for almost a decade, but to advance through those stages, and within a year following graduating from her PhD, she's already stepping into a faculty position. That is also almost unheard of. Usually it takes at least a couple of years of postdoc to obtain a tenure track faculty position. And so Taylor basically defied the odds of all of those things, and is where she's at today. And I hope that's a testament to the program. It's a testament to Taylor's ability and how she excelled, and the exceptional person that she is, and what the program, what the fellow, and the various support that it provides equips and enables a person to be able to do through the course of their graduate degree to lead her to where she's at today. It seems amazing at the surface that Taylor has gone on. She's contributed the ways in which she has and where she's at today. Even if you just zoom out for those that are more on the inside and understand, or more familiar with academic tracks and what you are or not supposed to do, she defied many of those odds within as well, which I think simply makes what she's done and where she's at today even that much more exceptional.
No, I'm glad we were able to have this conversation and really just broaden the optics for someone that isn't familiar with the nuances associated with that level of academia. There's a lot of moving parts there, a lot of things that maybe aren't known by others, and I think that's important to get out and to be able to give insight to some of those moving parts and behind the scene conversations that had to have occurred. To fast forward to present time, to the selection of Rebecca Rafferty as the second MFF Fellow probably warrants a little bit of history in the acknowledgement of what this fellow entails. It was a $250,000 commitment from MFF to the Monteith Shop for the MFF Fellow to be created. And essentially what that is, a 5-year commitment at $50,000 a year for this position, the stipend, as you mentioned, to be able to assist this position and the level of workload and the mission in front of all fellows, Taylor to start, Rebecca now, and then eventually someone else after Rebecca's position. Generally, is it expected that the fellow would be held by one individual for 2 years?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think this is an aspect that we are just working on and figuring out as we go. I think there's the situation where a person can hold that position for longer than a couple years, and I think it mainly stems from who that person is, what they're working on and working towards, and how in turn they are contributing to that realm of science, future wildlife management, and the partnership associated with Muley Fanatic Foundation. So I think it could be something that would be longer than 2 years. I think it's set up in a way to give us that flexibility to make sure we're supporting the right person, which is also the power behind that as well. As the co-lead of Muley Fanatic Foundation, if I can put it that way, as you have noted many times, you all have placed a high bar on science and helping advance science. One, to help inform wildlife management, but I think it does more than just like how do we make decisions in wildlife management, but I hope the kind of science that helps simultaneously contribute to understanding animals in a way that we didn't before, which also reinforces how we appreciate them or how we think about them, which at the end of the day I think is absolutely essential. But I think what's further unique in all of this is, one, it's pretty rare for a conservation organization to contribute to science at the level that Muley Fanatic Foundation does. And I believe, I guess I could be biased in the realm of, as a scientist, and believing what I believe in relative to the value of science. But at the same time, and as you and I have talked about a lot, it's hard to quantify that. And so it's hard to say we did this and made this level of contribution. It's much easier to talk about how many acres of habitat were treated or whatever, even though in some of those instances we may not know exactly what that means relative to the benefit. It's far more easier to quantify. And it's not to negate the value of those sorts of endeavors. They're absolutely valuable, from habitat protection to treatment to changes in the landscape that help foster existence of these animals over the long term. It's absolutely essential. But to have the complementary aspect associated with science informing those things and informing our people groups, I think it's ever more critical, but it's really hard to say we did this. How do you put a quantified amount associated with it? And so I think it's very commendable and maybe even risky. I don't know. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that side of it. It's risky to be able to dig into science in that way because maybe it's harder to sell. It's harder to pitch how you quantify it in that way. In this realm associated with the Muley Fanatic Foundation Fellow, I don't know if it's even more meaningful is you're not just investing in a specific research project where you get to talk about the outcomes of a research project or what we're learning, but you're actually investing in a person at a stage in their life when hope they're gonna advance in immense and incredible ways that's going to equip them to go on and do even more and better things into the future. And those contributions aren't measurable. I think we have a vision for it and a hope for it, and we're beginning to see that play out for somebody, for example, in somebody like Taylor Lashard, and I'm certain Rebecca will follow suit in that way. But it can be hard to quantify. Yet I think it's an incredibly meaningful endeavor and a contribution that is very visionary in that respect.
And I'll just to circle back with what you've indicated and just your inquisitiveness of how did we land on being able to make a decision like this and the risk associated with that. I think it's all rooted in knowing that the need, the want, and really the accountability to decisions that are made within wildlife management are rooted in science. And they are rooted in a way that best information available, as we've talked about many times, is the toolbox for being able to make decisions. And to ever think that we're in a position or a place to be able to know that we know all is very short-sighted. And the aspect of being able to pursue and continue to learn and to continue to add to that toolbox to make the best informed decisions with the best information available, there's not a lot of risk in that in my mind. I think that's something that can resonate with a lot of people to understand how research influences wildlife policy, being able to draw from that source of information and what has been garnered and gathered over a period of time. There is value in there that is beyond a dollar figure in my mind. Let's always be able to and be willing to pursue the best information available to help us make the best decisions. I appreciate you indicating that you see this from your perspective in the optics of you looking at this from afar, not being in the nonprofit conservation community, that there is potentially a risk in doing this. But I hope that understanding of why we're able to rally and be so supportive of it, I hope that resonates not only with others, but I hope that's really your understanding of our motivation as well. Kevin, specific, and we could talk about this at length, but in respect of time, there are a couple of things I had an aim of wanting to try to be able to accomplish in being able to have this visit. And in respect of your time as well, let me set the table first. Talk about the various programs and the research projects that are being handled and the makeup of what that team looks like, separate from your obligations to the university as a professor, but as the leader of the Monteith Shop. What does that look like? How many folks are involved or are part of the Monteith Shop, and then the various research projects that are active right now within the Monteith Shop? Just so you know, and I'm not setting you up, but I do want you to know my intent there is to be able to get to a point to how and why Rebecca Rafferty was selected to be the MFF Fellow following Dr. Taylor Lashar that was announced in December of 2024. I know there's a lot of talent within the Monteith Shop, but I know that decision weighed heavily on you in being able to be that ambassador moving forward and what that meant, and to be able to carry that torch that Dr. Lashar held high. But I think it's also important to be able to talk about all the different moving parts. Granted, there's a mule deer specific aspect to this with the MFF Fellow, and there's other work within the Monteith Shop that is beyond the scope of mule deer specific.
Yeah, just briefly highlight some of the ongoing pieces. I have a core group of us that are working on conservation-related questions associated with endangered sheep in the Sierra Nevadas and how that interfaces with populations of mule deer and mountain lions in particular, and the various dynamics associated with recovery in Sierra sheep, the interface between habitat and predation. And so I have currently 2 PhD students working on that, Yasemin Shakiri and Seth Rankins. And then our sheep work in Northwest Wyoming, our other long-term project that's been working on disentangling various contributions to sheep population in the face and while they're contending with pneumonia and what it means for management. And so I've had a master's student and a PhD student that have come through the ranks initially with that. Brittany Wagler, who finished a master's and now is a research scientist with us. Rachel Smiley, a near finishing PhD student, and then a new master student on that project. Actually, he's not so new anymore, but took it over after Rachel and Brittany were done in the field, and that's Jack Gavin. And then we have some work that's associated with moose as well for some time, and working on understanding how moose make decisions and in particular contend with heat in their environment, as well as ways to work towards bolstering food and habitat for moose specifically. Just recruited a new student for that, Becky Barbier, who is coming on to lead that work. It was kicked off by Brittany Wagler. And then Rebecca Levine, who is now a research scientist. She got her master's working on moose out of Matiti country, addressing some of those heat-related questions as well, and then is currently working to drive some of our advanced work associated with moose and potentially novel ways in which they contend with heat in their environment, specific to antlers, actually. And then a couple of other folks, Taylor Wagstaff and Ben Regan, who are Taylor, our lab coordinator, Ben Regan, our long-term, basically artist and technician that's plugged into the group. Many of these people actually plug in some form or another with the Wyoming Range Project through the year, as well as even using some of those data with targeted specific questions that we're able to leverage within that long-term data set. And Jacob Peck, who's been working on multiple questions associated with ontogeny migration, aspects associated with the rose petal hypothesis, and then led our work on basically matrilineal lines and considering contact within family groups associated with CWD outside of Casper. And then, of course, we have Rebecca, who came here following Taylor and working within the Wyoming Range Mule Deer Project. And even going through all of that and thinking about something that's being mule deer centric, if you consider that at the surface, I think the ideal person to be a Muley Fanatic Foundation Fellow takes the right person. And maybe that is somewhat specific and tied to mule deer, but ideally that person that is hard charging, driven, has a desire to contribute to science beyond just doing science and coming here and getting a degree, and then is equipped with the capabilities and the associated project that's going to have the power to address those next level questions that are helping us understand ultimately what makes mule deer tick, not only what we see with regards to population going up or down, but what that means for individual animals and our ability to be able to scale that up to understand those mechanisms within populations. And Rebecca, which hopefully that story will come out relative to more of who she is, where she's come from, but her pathway coming here was not normal, not traditional in any way, and not to steal her thunder from the conversation that you're going to have with her, but she basically made a midlife career change, seeing her needs, desires, and her passion to be able to contribute to sound science and wildlife management in that way, in some sort of interesting circumstances, through reaching out to me, various connections associated with that. She knew of the Wyoming Range Mule Deer Project and the type of information that we were gleaning from it, even before she had applied for a position that would potentially lead her on a pathway to eventually be leading it. And so I think it's a profound story, and I hope ultimately for her is an opportunity to fulfill a dream in that way, and not just a dream to become a scientist and contribute to it, but a dream that was associated with someone who was completely on the outside at that point in time, looking in and seeing the value of this long-term, individual-based, collaborative project and what we were gaining from it, to then eventually seeing that she wanted to be able to do that kind of science, and then eventually being down the pathway where she's not only that person that's engaging in directly in doing that kind of science, but then is simultaneously named as the Muley Fanatic Foundation Fellow. I think it's a profound and inspiring story.
Yeah, it is. I just appreciate a little bit more explanation to how that process worked, to the thought process that you put into this to be able to come to that sound decision. And yeah, so thanks for that. We could have made this 45-minute podcast now about 10 minutes probably, but I think it was important. And the reason why it's so important to me, for full disclosure, is, this isn't Josh Coursey money. This isn't Joey Fagel money. This isn't just MFF money. No. Where that money comes from is there's an accountability that I hold to the highest level of responsibility in being good stewards of the dollars that are generated by everyday sportsmen and sportswomen to support Muley Fanatic Foundation. And so any allocation of any dollar that's ever made on behalf of MFF, I see that as spending somebody else's money and knowing that that investment needs to be done with great thoughtfulness and genuine consideration. Is that how folks want their money spent? And we have been able to rally a large base of support for sound science and the influence and really what has provoked changes within wildlife management and that are rooted in science. And from launching the PhD project with the Monteith Shop in 2015 to the continued support that has now been over a decade for the Wyoming Range project, it's a staple within our efforts. And it comes with a great responsibility to be able to allocate those dollars with the accountability to many. And so just the further explanation right from the horse's mouth from you on this, I thought was warranting of a good conversation for folks to truly grasp what maybe is the motivator on our end to be able to be in this arena and to be tied directly to the Monteith Shop.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I hope all your listeners and those that are invested and believe in Muley Fanatic Foundation and contribute to your mission directly, as you all contribute to our various program, the research from, as you noted, the Deer Project, to what was ultimately responsible for plugging a gap so that Wyoming Range Mule Deer Project still exists to today. Now the Muley Fanatic Foundation Fellow, we don't take that lightly. We don't take that for granted, as you believe you have a responsibility, and you do, and we certainly have a responsibility as well to put those resources to use wise and sound manners. And I hope that those contributions are leveraged and there's even that much more value added. Many of these things are not directly measurable, as we noted, but we take that seriously and hope that our contributions are truly making a difference for that end game over the long term. And I think, I don't know, not lacking real elegant words, maybe some have heard me use this quote before, but Aldo Leopold, the father of wildlife management, basically right before he died, he was about to get a book published. That book was the San County Almanac, and he wrote that book. It was dedicated towards a public audience. And as a father of wildlife management and conservation, he was a scientist, but he felt compelled to write a book that targeted the general public. And he was an incredible naturalist as well. And so he just thought about things differently, observed things in nature that I think many of us lost an appreciation for. But that book as a whole, I think in many ways, and he refers to it through the book in many different respects, maybe not without deliberately saying it multiple times, but I think it's an inspiring book that gets us through observation and through understanding, thinking about things in a different ways, and many times references the notion that how do we appreciate it if we don't understand it? And I think it's that notion of science in detailed and nuanced ways that helps us appreciate and understand animals in a different way. One of my favorite quotes of his is, there are two spiritual dangers in not owning a farm. One is the danger of supposing that breakfast comes from the grocery, and the other, that heat comes from the furnace. And it's essentially the aspect of for example, if we direct this straight to mule deer, we just think about mule deer, it's Wyoming. We have relatively lots of them compared with many other states across the West, and they're just there, and they live there. And supposing that they just show up each year on this seasonal range and that's it, but it's getting beneath that and understanding and appreciate that and thinking about them in other ways, we realize the food just doesn't just come from the grocery, but it's knowing where it comes from, what the implications are of that. That deer didn't just suddenly show up there one day. It has a story to tell. It came from certain places on the landscape. And only once we dig into, the level of science that we're working to conduct, being able to do it over a long time frame, as you referenced, to be able to understand what seasonal and shifting patterns across the landscape actually mean, that it gives us the power to be able to understand what that means for those individual animals and not just have the knowledge, but to appreciate them in different ways, which I think is the power of science and conservation. Isn't just knowledge, but it's also what comes with that knowledge and how it changes us. I hope that through this and through this program, and honestly, the work that Rebecca is going to be able to plug into, and as much like Taylor, she's very well equipped and is growing an ability to communicate some of those nuanced ways and to be able to tell those stories that are going to be hopefully touching us and influencing the way we think for many years to come.
I'd be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to just let folks know that not only you, the good doctor, Kevin Monteith, but the Monteith Shop, many members of his team, including MFF Fellow Rebecca Rafferty, will be on hand at Mule Deer Days coming up March 21st through the 23rd, and then again at the Mile High Hunt and Fish Expo in Denver at the Gaylord, April 11th through the 13th. And a great opportunity to visit with these folks directly, firsthand, and to be able to ask questions, to converse with them on ideas, thoughts. You guys you're an open book when it comes to being able to be approachable by complete strangers, and I know you relish in those opportunities and take great satisfaction in being able to hear what other people are thinking and criticism. I know you ask all the time, give me criticism, give me constructive. I want to hear it. What's missing? What are we not thinking about? What can't we see? I know you put a great value on citizen science and people that have lived on the landscape for generations and their observations and how that information helps formulate other ideas and talking points and ultimately other science and research projects. That opportunity is coming, and it's coming soon. March 21st through the 23rd, Mule Deer Days, and then April 11th through the 13th, the Mile High Hunt and Fish Expo in Denver at the Gaylord. Just want to get that out there. Please visit with these folks directly. Visit with Kevin directly. He's a pretty easy guy to talk to.
I hope so.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. Come see us and come support Muley Fanatic Foundation. And it's a fun time besides that.
Yeah, it is. It's a great time. I enjoy the conversation. It's always very thought-provoking, and just appreciate your time. And thanks for this opportunity to do the deep dive into the MFF Fellow and what that really looks like. And
no, thanks so much for the time and the frank conversation. And please accept our humble gratitude for the support of you, of the foundation, and all of your supporters in making the Muley Fanatic Foundation Fellow possible.
The good Dr. Kevin Monteith from the Monteith Shop. Wild things and wild places. Until next time, happy trails.
And that wraps up another episode of Wild Things and Wild Places. But remember, the journey doesn't end here. Make sure you never miss out by subscribing. Whether you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, streaming us on our website, or following us on social media, subscribing is the best way to stay connected. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for more wild episodes.
Everybody knows I'm a Muley fanatic.